The Apostle Paul said, "Now abideth faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love." 1 Corinthians 13:13. But why? Why is love greater than faith and greater than hope? In Matthew 22, verses 36 to 40, Jesus said, "The great commandment is love, loving God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength." But why? Why is it the great commandment? In 1 Corinthians 12:31, Paul said that love is the more excellent way. But why? But before answering that question, is there more than one kind of love? If so, which kind is the greatest, and why is it the greatest? There are several kinds of love. There is an eros love, but it's limited to pleasure. There's a philia love, and it's limited to brothers or close of kin. There is a storge love, but it's limited to a family. But agape love, the love mentioned in 1 Corinthians 13 and the love that describes the Almighty, 1 John 4 and 8, is unlimited. It extends beyond family and beyond close of kin to neighbors and to enemies and to the whole world. This word is unreciprocal. It's not a two-way street. It's unaffected by the reaction of other people. As a little girl loves her doll, she doesn't expect any love in return. She just simply loves. And agape love is that kind of love. It is not limited to certain associations. It is not limited to certain conditions or certain situations or circumstances. It is that kind of love that is the greatest of all. Furthermore, it is not just a sentimentality. It is not just an emotionalism. Other loves have to do mostly with affection, but this love has to do with the mind and with the will, as well as with the emotion. The root meaning of the word is the will to do good, and Romans 13 and 10 said, "Love works no ill will to his neighbor." Why? Because the very word itself means the will to do good. If there's no will to do good, there's no love. And so this kind of love has a certain attitude of mind and a certain desire of will. And every time that word is used, there will always be that attitude of mind and there will always be that desire of will. We speak of falling in love, but that's really not necessarily a virtue. There's no particular merit in falling in love. If you can fall in, you can fall out. It's not an achievement. It's just something that simply happens. But this word, unlike that, is a deliberate principle. And it is this particular word that is used when the Bible said God is love, 1 John 4 and 8. So this word is a great love and the greatest of all characteristics and qualities because it is so God-like. In Matthew 5 and 44 and 45, Jesus said, "Love your enemies, bless them that persecute you or curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you." Then He said that you may be as your Father in heaven, or be children of the Father in heaven, who makes His sun to rise upon the evil and the good and sends His rain on the just and the unjust. Notice that God seeks man's greatest good regardless of man's attitude and regardless of his actions. In Romans 5 and 8, Paul said, when we were enemies, God loved us. He loved us even though we didn't react accordingly. So this kind of love is a one-way street. It is not reciprocal. So it's unlimited, it's unaffected, it is unconditional, unsituational, uncircumstantial. And it is this kind of love that is used in 1 Corinthians 13 and 13. Paul begins that great chapter by saying, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels," but not everybody could speak with the tongues of men and of angels. But everybody could have this kind of love, and for that reason, love is even greater than the miraculous gift of speaking in tongues. Furthermore, in 1 Corinthians 12, 29 and 30, by the very construction of the Greek and by the negative that is used, the Lord in essence said, not everybody can speak in tongues. As far as we know, John the Baptist never spoke in tongues. As far as we know, Christ himself never spoke in tongues. And many people didn't have that gift. So this was not for everybody, but this kind of love is reachable by all people. And then Paul goes on to say, though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge and have all faith so as to remove mountains, but not everybody had the gift of prophecy. Not everybody could understand all mysteries. Not everybody had that supernatural knowledge. But everybody can have this kind of love. But not only was it not for everybody, it was not forever, some of these things. 1 Corinthians 13:8, whether there be prophecies, they shall fail, but not love. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease, but not love. And whether there be knowledge, referring to supernatural knowledge, it shall vanish away. And then in verse 10, he speaks of being done away. And so love is the greatest because it is for everybody and it is for all time. And now abideth faith, hope, love. These three abide longer than prophecies and tongues and knowledge, supernatural knowledge, and the gift of mysteries and so forth. But of these three, though all three abide longer than these others, love abides even longer than the other two. Faith will someday cease to be faith, and hope will someday cease to be hope. But love does not cease. There is no time limit on it. No wonder Jesus used this as a mark of discipleship. John 13:33-35. Or in 1 Corinthians 16:14, Paul said, let all that you do be done in love. Why? Because of the very nature of the Word. It is the will to do good. It is so God-like. No one word more perfectly describes the Almighty. The very nature of God is love. Everything God ever did was good. Everything He ever said, everything He ever asked, every threat, every warning, every bit of information, all of God's actions have been good. In fact, all good comes down from God, James 1:17. So in the very Word itself, there is goodness and the will to do good, a certain attitude of mind, a certain desire of will. Well, also, the Bible said, let by love serve one another, Galatians 5:13. Or he speaks of the faith that works by love, Galatians 5:6. Now, this kind of love is not just in word, but it's in work. It's not by lip, but by life. It's not just a promise, but it's a practice. It's not just a language, it's a loyalty. It's not just an explanation, it's an exemplification. It's not just some definition, it's a demonstration. For instance, Boaz proved his love for Ruth. Ruth 2 verses 15 and 16. It was a deliberate principle. It was a certain attitude of mind and a certain desire of will. Jacob proved his love for Rachel, Genesis 29:20. That wasn't something that just happened. Nobody accidentally, unexpectedly, or naturally loves an enemy. Well, this kind of love is not just accidental. It's not just unexpected, or it's not something that just happens. It is deliberate, and for that reason, it is the greatest thing of all. The Good Samaritan proved his love for the man by the wayside, Luke 10, verses 25-37. The woman who anointed Jesus with that very precious ointment, very expensive, proved her love for Christ, Mark 14, verses 1 and following. The Samaritans, or the Macedonians, 2 Corinthians 8, verses 1-5, proved their love for the Lord and for His great cause and for the people involved in that cause. So words don't prove love, but deeds do. And this word is not just something we say, but something we show. And in 1 Corinthians 13, all of those characteristics are but really a demonstration rather than a definition of love. Think about those for a moment. There are 8 negatives and 7 positives. Many people think that we ought never to deal with the negative. But life isn't all positive, nor is it all negative. And love is both positive and negative. But in this negative and this positive, we have really what love is. In a world of impatience and bitterness, love suffers long and is kind. Now, bitterness is not good, impatience isn't good, but the word love means the will to do good, and kindness is good, and Paul mentions that we ought to be kind one to another, Ephesians 4:32. Proverbs 19:22 said the thing that's really desirable about a man is his kindness. But furthermore, in a world of jealousy, love envieth not. Now, envy isn't good, and the word love means the will to do good. And so, envy then is destructive. The Philistines envied Isaac, and they covered up the wells that Isaac's father had digged, Genesis 26, verses 14 and 15. And envy always seeks to get rid of the object of its envy. The people envied Jesus, and so they delivered him up to be crucified, Matthew 27 and 18, and Pilate recognized that. Furthermore, envy is a work of the flesh, 1 Corinthians 3 and 3. It's a part of carnality. Where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work, James 3 and 16. In fact, Song of Solomon 8 and 6 summarizes it by saying that jealousy or envy is as cruel as the grave. So love envies not. When others are well and we're sick, love envies not. Others are happy and we're sad, love envies not. When others rise and we fail or we don't succeed, love envies not. Because love is the will to do good. But furthermore, in a world of boasting and pride, love vaunteth not itself and is not puffed up. Pride and boasting have never been good. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall, Proverbs 16 and 18. Or Daniel 4:37, those that walk in pride he is able to abase. Or Matthew 23:12. The Bible said, he that exalteth himself shall be abased. And we've seen this over and over again in cities, in individuals, as well as in communities, churches, and so forth. So pride or boasting is never good, but love is the will to do good. Furthermore, in a world of misbehavior and in a world of loose living, love does not behave itself unseemly. Christianity is a matter of believing in Christ, belonging to Christ, and behaving like Christ. Paul wrote to Timothy that men might know how to behave themselves in the house of God, 1 Timothy 3:15. And Christianity deals with our behavior. And love helps us to behave properly because the very meaning of it is the will to do good. It's a certain attitude of mind and it's a certain desire of will. But furthermore, in a world of selfishness, love seeks not its own. In Philippians 2 verses 3 and 4, Paul mentions that we ought not look upon our own things, but upon the things of others. We ought to be interested in others. What about Jesus? While he was on the cross, he prayed, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, Luke 23:34. Or on the way to the cross, the women were weeping, and he turned and said, don't weep for me, but weep for yourselves. He was always thinking about others. And that's really love. In fact, we could just substitute the word Christ for the word love in 1 Corinthians 13. And Christ is the epitome of it. For instance, Christ suffered long and is kind. Christ envied not. Christ is not puffed up, doesn't vaunt himself. Christ does not behave himself unseemly. Christ seeks not his own. He's not provoked. And in a world of anger, love isn't provoked. Now, anger is not good. In fact, anger is just one letter short of danger. Anger is an acid that will do more damage to the vessel in which it is stored than anything on which it is poured. And the Bible said, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools, Ecclesiastes 7 and 9. And Paul warned that we not let the sun go down on that wrath, Ephesians 4:26. Somebody said, I'm at the mercy of anybody who can make me mad. Or somebody else said that madness or anger is the devil's playground. You ever thought of how some people use terrible language that wouldn't think of using profanity when they're not mad? When a person's mad, oftentimes it becomes destructive, and normally he's not destructive. So anger is not good. It's not good at all. And that's why love is not provoked. It takes a lot to make love mad. But furthermore, in a world of skepticism, love taketh no account of evil. It doesn't even think evil. In Matthew 7, verses 1 and following, Jesus said, "Judge not that you be not judged." And that's really love. Love doesn't really pass construction on somebody's actions. If a man's actions are capable either of a favorable or an unfavorable condition or situation, and we don't know which, aren't we bound in Christian love always to take the favorable view? And doesn't love keep us from having undue severity of judgment? Doesn't it keep bad motives from warping our judgment of somebody else? We don't really have a right to judge unless we possess full knowledge of all the facts in the case. Love will cure judging, and it will also kill the desire to do so. But then again, love not only doesn't think evil, it doesn't rejoice in iniquity, but it rejoices in the truth. And in a world of retaliation, we need this. Love never seeks revenge, Matthew 5:39 and following. Love never laughs at calamity. It never is happy or thrilled even when an enemy is suffering, because love is the will to do good. It's a certain attitude of mind. It's a certain desire of will. So it's greater than some emotionalism. It's greater than some sentimentality. It's greater than something that's just limited to certain people, certain situations, certain circumstances, or certain reactions. No, this kind of love is unlimited. It's unreciprocal. But then again, this love beareth all things. In a world of cowardice, we need this. It also is very, very optimistic. It believeth all things. It puts the best possible construction upon a man's actions. In Romans 8:28, the Bible said, "We know, not we think, we guess." It's not a matter of surmising. It's not a matter of speculation. Paul said, "We know that all things," not some things, all things, regardless of what's mentioned, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. Well, apparently love really believes this. Love really embraces this great thought, because love believeth all things. It believes the best. Peter said, love covers a multitude of sins, 1 Peter 4:8. That doesn't mean that it just winks at sin. It doesn't mean that it just tries deliberately to deceive people about it. But love won't believe the bad things about somebody until it is convinced beyond any shadow of doubt. It takes a lot to convince love that something is amiss. That's the kind of love that describes God. That's the kind of love that's the badge of discipleship. That's the thing that the Lord said, "Let all that you do be done in love." Not just any kind of love. This is the love that really counts. This is the love that makes the world a greater place in which to live. That's why the Bible said, upon that commandment of love, all the law and all the prophets hang. It's the mainspring of Christian activity. It's really the springboard for so much of what we do. It kindles the fires of faith and it sets aglow the lamps of hope. It beareth all things, it believeth all things, it hopeth all things, it endureth all things. Love never fails. Well, the Bible tells us that love is a part of the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22-23. When you read of the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5, notice the word is singular, not plural. He doesn't speak of the fruits, plural, of the Spirit, and love being one of them, and joy being one, and peace being one. No, fruit singular. That means it takes all of these characteristics, 9 in all, in Galatians 5:22 and 23. It takes all of them to really make up the fruit that is spoken of. And the first one mentioned is love. Now, while it's the first mention in the fruit of the Spirit, it is the climax of what we commonly call the Christian virtues in 2 Peter 1:5-7. Where Peter said, "Give all diligence, add to your faith virtue, To your virtue knowledge, to your knowledge temperance, temperance patience, patience godliness, godliness brotherly kindness, and brotherly kindness love. So this love then is not like eros love, limited to a certain association only. It's not like philia love, limited to a certain association only. It's not like storge love. This is one of the biggest words in all of the Bible. And it really is the best word to stand for God Himself when the Bible said God is love. So Paul said, love suffers long and is kind, envies not, vaunts not itself, is not puffed up, doesn't behave itself unseemly, seeks not its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, rejoices not in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, it endures all things, it never fails. So let's think for a moment before we close today of how long love lasts. We mentioned a while ago that love will outlast faith because faith will someday become reality. It outlasts hope because hope someday will become reality. But in Song of Solomon 8 and 7, the Scripture says that many waters cannot quench love and floods cannot drown it. And that's a great thought. It will last as long as God lasts. And when we have that kind of love, we are very much like the Almighty, because He does love regardless of people's action. He seeks their good regardless of how they think, even if they should turn their back upon Him. And that's the kind of love that the Lord wants all of us to have. The Bible said, now abides faith, hope, love. The greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13:13. And the great commandment is love. Loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Matthew 22:36-40. And the more excellent way that Paul spoke of in 1 Corinthians 12:31 is the way of love. So it's greater than anything else that could be mentioned. And without that kind of love, we wouldn't even begin to serve the Lord. May the Lord help us to think soberly, prayerfully, and seriously along these things, and always keep in mind that the greatest thing in the world is love.
There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its word. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. It tells me of a Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of His precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. It tells of one whose loving heart can feel my deepest woe, who in each sorrow bears a part that none can bear below. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because He first loved me.
This has been The Truth in Love, sponsored by the Churches of Christ of the North Texas area. For a copy of today's program, additional information, or Bible correspondence course at no charge to you, please write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. Once again, write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. We invite you to attend the Church of Christ in your area. Join us again next Sunday at the same time for The Truth in Love.